Some of the justification for Putin's invasion of Ukraine is that Ukraine has never been a separate state, and Ukrainian nationality is illusory. This is absurd. First of all, Ukraine existed as a concept before the concept of national state took hold. And, of course, Ukraine was part of the wider Russian Empire in the late Tsarist period, and then, of course, it was incorporated into the USSR under Stalin. But at the beginning of the USSR period, it was entirely independent. And during the Tsarist period, particularly in the 18th century, as the idea of nationalism took hold, there was a Ukrainian nationalist revival. And it's that idea of Ukrainian self-identity which is so important. Now, Putin, he had many opportunities to say that the special military operation was about nationalism, but instead he talked about ethnicity and language. And although international law might recognize nationalism, it certainly doesn't recognize ethnicity and language as some sort of separate entity that needs rescuing. So Putin's argument for invading Ukraine has always been spurious. Always. And that's why it's constantly been changing. Putin fabricated a precondition to protect its compatriots by handing out Russian passports, by exporting Russians into Ukraine, by, even at the moment, selling cheap flats in Mariupol. I have friends who used to have factories in Mariupol, all destroyed now. And the whole of Putin's war is based on deceit, is based on not calling it a war, on calling it a special military operation, in the rights and legitimate interests of compatriots abroad, protecting our compatriots, protecting the Ukraine from itself, from its Nazi elements. There were only Nazis imported into Ukraine by the Wagner Brigade. The Wagner Brigade are named after the musician that was celebrated by the Nazis in Germany. Richard Wagner, great musician, but nevertheless appropriated by Hitler. And incidentally, let's not overlook the fact that Wagner himself was a racist and an anti-Semite. And also the other argument which is put forward by Putin is the argument that this is an orthodox crusade to rescue a country from liberalism, from some sort of LGBTQ plus NATO-led invasion. And the idea that Putin is responding to a NATO attack is again absurd. The idea that Putin is responding to a US-led attack is absurd. And why can I be so confident about that? Because there is no single scenario put forward by Putin's cronies. It's whatever seems convenient at the time. That's what's put forward. It's a constantly changing defense for this extraordinary invasion. No one's sure why it was done, except to boost Putin's chances of success in the coming presidential election so that he looks tough. Because everybody has to admit the time has come when he can't really take off his shirt and strut around. He's looking old and frail. So he has to do it with guns and with missiles and with the threat of invasion. He did it in Georgia. He thought he could easily do it in Ukraine. He miscalculated. He was a fool. When you look into Putin's eyes, you know this is a man who can make a stupid mistake. You know. He's a thug, and he's a twit. He has simplicity written into his DNA, and that is the problem. Simplicity and deceit. Ukraine was only very briefly in the USSR empire. Ukraine was only partially in the Tsarist empire. Ukraine means edge. And that edge has constantly been changing. Russia needs Ukraine because it was from Kyiv that Russia got its soul. Russia needs Ukraine because it's from Ukraine that Russia gets its wheat. Ukraine is the breadbasket of Russia. Ukraine is the place where so many of the Russian folklore traditions come from. The Cossack dancers, Ukrainian. The Cossack spirit. But it's that spirit which is still there today. Russia, the USSR, thought that it had eradicated the Cossacks. That spirit of defiance, of determination, of resistance is absolutely manifest in President Zelenskyy. And Putin misunderstood what he calls the comedian. Zelenskyy isn't a comedian. Zelenskyy is a consummate performer. And Putin underestimated him.